So this is my first video post-election. Yes, I'm excited that Barack Obama has gained 4 more years to victory for this nation. I think it's quite clear from the way that Obama won why it's a victory for this nation. Why I would say that, because while even there were mobs, for example, at Jackson in Mississippi, where James Meredith had to sort of call in the federal guard to help him integrate that school during the civil rights era almost 50 years ago. We saw mobs there last night, the night of the election. We saw this kind of, sobering reaction from many conservatives. But what they had to face is that Barack Obama won on sheer demographics. For example, people talk about the Latino vote and how overwhelmingly people of color, gay people, and then to a great extent women voters as well went for Romney. Now what that says to me is that clearly the shift away from the white male superpower as the model for how we pattern our lives, that kind of God complex model, is no longer viable. And it's not it's partially ideological, but I would say that it's partially not ideological, because when you look at the conservative values that many people talk about, there are many liaisons with communities of color, and yet their inability to reach out to us has everything to do with their attitude, not with specifically their politics, but of course their attitude injects a venom into the politics that drove all of those voters away. This is not conjecture again. We saw what happened on election night, and once Florida's in, we might even find that Obama he already won by a landslide, but if he were to win by 330 electoral college votes to Romney's 203, 204, it would just say yet again what we already know to be true, that a certain vision for America is very much over. And it's particularly the social issues or what came to matter, because I think that people, even though a lot of people might have a difficult time to specifically draw a red line between social issues and the economy, I think people do understand that it's the social issues where we establish that we can have a dialogue so that we can tackle the economical issues. So they're not separate. It's not like, the economy or the social issues, but it's what kind of people, what kind of conversation do we have when we're having the conversation about the economy. And so it's not just that, Obama was pro-gay marriage, visits many rights upon everybody's bodies, women's bodies, giving women, I hate to use this word choice because it's not as simple as pro-choice or anti-choice, but to have a more liberal, progressive stance on abortion, I think is really important, because it's not, again, that anyone will vote on one of those single issues, but it's the way that you deal with different people seeing through these social issues that indicates to us that no, we're not the ones, to handle this. And to see that gay marriage, again, we talk about being a pawn, sort of being a pawn between political parties, because the reality is, on the conservative side, you have all these voters, and you can look on over and over, conservatives, individuals, citizens, and also pundits' responses to the election, and they keep talking about the society is going to hell and religious freedom and all this. Now, of course, you're going to have to sit down and see the irony in all that, part of which is that the religious freedom that you're talking about is not religious freedom at all, because if you're really talking about religious freedom, you wouldn't be so anti other religions. You would be able to build coalitions across religious bounds, and you don't see evangelists doing that. You see them becoming a more narrow-minded cohort within the American community, and that is something that is just, that kind of leadership, that being able to mob the society into backwardness is just over. And so it's not an indictment of Christianity, but it is an indictment on certain kinds of Christians who have a very narrow view and keep talking about religious freedom, but religious freedom to only worship like I worship. And until people can understand that distinction, and it's not one that is very easily laid out in popular media. Well, until we can understand it, it's difficult to conquer it. And so it is just going to be a numbers game of them against us. And conservatives lost. But that doesn't mean that America lost. I mean, had someone like Mitt Romney won, and in the past, the Mitt Romney types have won. I mean, look at Reagan and how socially conservative he was. Well, what you find there is that people don't trust them. People don't believe them. People are not willing to put their political futures in their hands anymore. The way that that Superman white male figure may have bullied people into doing in the past, and so. It is a new day. It is a very new day. Don't take this election lightly. It is not just any other election. It is not even the election of 2008 where we elected, our first non-white, one of a few very non-elite background presidents. But it is also one that is confirming that we are on a very different path. And it is not one to hell. Rest assured, as much as people might say that, look at how those people are saying that. Do they have any level of empathy or compassion for anyone who is different from them? No. And just I always ask them, well, they keep talking about gay rights, but what do you tell me as a gay person, like face to face, as an American? And I've had, videos on this channel about conversations I've had with, very conservative people, and even as I'm standing there, face to face talking to them, they can't see me as human. Suddenly, if I'm gay, then I'm just a block. And so, of course, if they knew that I was black before they knew that I was gay, what were they already assuming? How were they already talking about me as a black voter? People assume that we have this sort of racial solidarity. And perhaps there is an element of racial solidarity that spurred the overwhelming majority of African American voters to vote for Barack Obama. But what about the 43 people beforehand? I mean, was there an element of white racial solidarity? And the fact is, that white racial solidarity has been very dangerous in the past. And that era is just over. Now, we can, of course, expect continued backlash. We can, of course, expect, continued sorts of mob violence that people return towards, because I think that it is difficult for unenlightened white people, sort of white people who really were invested in that kind of white identity. So obviously there are plenty of white people who are not like that. But for those who are still, and you can see them, Rush Limbaugh, it's just over. It's just over. And I realize that you guys are going to get violent. I saw the surging gun sales during both the 2008 and the 2012 election. That nigger's going to get in office, so we're going to go out and buy guns. Illegals and all the whole language that they've used this time is just so deeply offensive. To talk to Latino voters and then start talking about illegals. Well, they're not really talking about illegals because by definition they're not Latino voters. So they couldn't even address Latino voters at all. The only thing that they had to say to them was, well, they're illegals, So they didn't address them at all. Talking about gay issues. They didn't address gay. They didn't. I mean, when I say address, I mean like talk to gay voters. They had nothing to say to gay voters. They talked to other people about gay voters, but nothing to gay voters. Nothing to say, how are your lives as Americans? Same thing for African Americans. They start all that welfare business and everybody's on somebody's, Bill O'Reilly talking about everybody wants a handout. I mean, it just need I say that we're some of the hardest working, historically some of the hardest working Americans, period. The ones who built the White House, for example. So, I mean, that race-baiting, lazy welfare queen madness that they try to pin on us and Obama is just, they're not talking to us, they're talking about us. Asian American voters, I don't think they even said anything about Asian American voters. And they talk about class warfare, and Asian Americans as a whole are wealthier, as the wealthiest single group of voters in America. And so they also overwhelmingly supported President Obama. So to say that it's a just elite against the others, no, it's a certain kind of mentality. Until working class whites and poor whites, for example, more, en masses start to see how they've been duped by these wealthy elite, by rich white guys in the past, and of course there are many working class and poor whites who don't see that, but many have historically been bullied. I just, I give the analogy of, plantation politics. So, there were all the slaves, us, and there are all the slave owners. But in a state like Alabama, for example, only 1% of the people were slave owning, and they owned massive plantations. So again, we're talking about the 1%. So that makes clear who we're talking about. So what about the 99% of others who are in the same boat, as the slaves? The slave catchers, the slave workers, the white people who are competing with jobs because the slaves, totally undercut many sorts of jobs. So, you don't attack the slave for undercutting your job, you attack the system. And until we have more masses of, white working class people seeing past the Tea Party rhetoric in my own state, then white people will continue to feel disenfranchised. And that need not be, but it's going to be.